everyone, this is Gina. Today I'm going to show you how to make this little bracelet. Now I was thinking that it looked like a caterpillar, but I've changed my mind and decided that it looks more like a centipede with all these little Czech beads. So I have decided to name it the Centipede bracelet, which is kind of gross, but that's okay. It works for me. I'm going to go ahead and show you what you'll need for this bracelet now. Okay, so what we're going to use today is we're going to use 8mm round beads. Now I have chosen to use a metal bead out of my stash of stringing supplies I used to use years ago. And I've just tried to use up some of my older beads. So I'm going to use a metal bead. You can use anything 8mm round you'd like. Then I'm going to use this Czech oval peacock bead. Now you can find these on Etsy. You could use a dagger. You can use anything that's fairly flat and top drilled. These are 10 by 6. Then I will use a 4mm round bead. Of course, it can be anything you want that's 4mm round. It can be a crystal, it can be pearl, whatever you want. I'm using a drook, and it's kind of turquoise and black speckles. Then I'm going to use a crystal, and I'm going to use a 2x3 roundel Chinese crystal, and this is black, of course. Then I'm going to use an 11-0 seed bead, and this is a Toho 11-0, and it is black. And then for my clasping, I think I'm going to try this big square button with the 2 holes. Now you can use anything with the 2 holes through it that you'd like, or you can use, of course, a regular toggle clasp if you'd like. I'm going to try to use this today because I think it's just kind of neat, and I think the texturing is going to be nice with the metal beads. So I'm going to use this. Let's go ahead and get started with this project. Oh, you will also need a size 10 beading needle, and I suggest for this project, if you use the metal beads, 10-pound Fireline, because the beads are heavier, bigger holes, plus they're a little bit sharper. So I prefer to use a heavier Fireline for that. Now if you're using something other than a metal bead, then of course use your 8-pound. That'll be fine. I would suggest that you start by putting 2 wingspans of Fireline onto your needle. Unless you intend to extend your Fireline, then use whatever length is comfortable for you, and we'll get started. So after you have threaded your Fireline onto your needle, then you will pick up an 8mm round bead, a crystal roundel, 2 Czech oval beads, a crystal roundel, an 8mm round, a crystal roundel, 2 Czech oval beads, or daggers, or whatever you find that'll work, and then 1 more crystal roundel. I will show you what we have on our thread. Pull it to the end. Leave yourself a 6 to 8 inch to a foot, however much you like, to sew on your clasp. I like to leave a little extra because at least enough to extend something so that I have enough to sew through. This is what you will have: a roundel, 2 Czech beads. Well, actually, you'll start with 8mm round, a roundel, 2 Czech beads, a roundel, an 8mm round, a roundel, 2 Czech beads, and a roundel, just like this. Then we will just tie them into a knot. Just like that. Now we're going to sew through all these beads again. So don't tie them too tightly, but don't have any slack. And we're going to, since I'm using heavy beads, I'm going to sew all the way around each unit just to make sure that my Fireline will hold. Plus sometimes metal beads can be a little sharp, and of course I have crystal too. So I like to make sure that it's going to be secure. I'm going to sew all the way around. This is where my knot is. So I'll sew through here again, and then I'm going to sew my tail is here. I want to sew to this bead here, this 8mm round. I'm going to sew up through the crystal on one side and the 8mm round bead, and I'm going to exit without going through the roundel on the other side. Then I'm going to start an embellishment over the top. So we're going to move through this bracelet doing the embellishments as we make our base. So we're going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead, a crystal roundel, a 4mm round drook, or whatever you're using, a roundel, and an 11/0 seed bead. We're coming out of this side of this 8mm bead. We're going to go into the opposite side on the opposite 8mm round bead. So we're going to go into this side and just exit the 8mm round and pull. And pull your beads over the top of the 8mm round beads. Then you will pick up an 11/0 seed bead, a roundel, and then you will go into the drook on top here. So I'm going to go into this side here, and pull. Make sure you have very good tension on this. We're not going to sew back through it. We're doing our embellishments right now. So this is, you want to make sure that you have it nice and reinforced as you do this. Now you're going to pick up a roundel and an 11/0 onto your needle like this. You're coming out of the drook right here. We're going to go into the 8mm bead here, and just the 8mm bead. Try to avoid the crystal on the other side, which is proving to be difficult. There we go. I'm going to bring these beads up over the top, just a little closer, like this. And this is what you should have. Now we're ready to start our next unit. So we're going to share this 8mm round. So all we have to pick up is the rest in our series, and only one other 8mm round. So we'll start with a crystal roundel, and then we'll pick up 2 oval Czech beads, if I can get them, it being stubborn, and then a crystal roundel, and then I will pick up my 8mm round, and then I will pick up a crystal roundel, 2 Czech beads, and a crystal roundel. I'm going to bring this all down to my work so you can see what I have. So I done all my series with just one 8mm because this is my other 8mm in this unit. So I'm just going to come down into this 8mm bead right here. And I'm going to pull the unit tight, and then I'm going to sew around the entire unit again because we need to secure it, make sure that we have great tension, make sure that everything is strong and that our beads will not gnaw through our Fireline here. So I'm just going to sew all the way around. If it's loose as you sew, that's okay, because when you get around you can pull it tight. Then I'm going to come back through the joining bead here, and I am ready to do my embellishment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead, and then a crystal roundel, and then a drook, and then a crystal roundel, and then an 11/0 seed bead like this. I'm coming out of this bead here. I'm going to go into the opposite bead on the opposite side and just through that big bead. I'm going to pull this down over the top of my 8mm beads, that is, and then I'm going to pick up an 11/0, a crystal roundel, and I'm going to come up through the bottom of this drook right here. And pull it tight like this. And then I'm going to pick up an 11-0. Actually, a roundel first, and then an 11-0, like this. And I am going to come through this 8mm round here. And now I'm going to sew back until I can get to this 8mm round. So I'm just going to go up through this crystal, through these two little Czech beads, and this finishes out my second round of thread on this side. So now it's reinforced completely on all sides. And my tension is tight. So we're going to do one more unit, and then I will let you go to length. So we are going to pick up a roundel, 2 oval Czech beads, and a roundel, and an 8mm bead. I'm going to drop those down. Then I'm going to pick up a roundel, 2 Czech beads. Well, these little things just do not want to pick up. And a roundel. And bring these down so you can see what I have. Come on down. Come on down. Okay. So this is what I have. And I'm going to come back up through the 8mm bead and just the 8mm bead. And pull it tight like this. Then I'm going to sew all the way around the entire unit. So I'm going to flip it over just so I can get to it a little bit better. And I'm going to sew through all the beads that I added, like this, until I get back to the connecting bead. Like this. Turn it back over so you can see what it looks like. Somehow I got my tail mixed up. There we go. Okay. See, we're coming out of the connecting bead right here. My tail is over here. That was a little confusing, I'm sorry. And then we pick up an 11-0 seed bead, and we're going to put our embellishment over the top again. So an 11-0 seed bead, a roundel, a 4mm round. But all these beads are just hard to pick up. I just can't do it. And then a roundel and an 11-0, just like this. We're coming out of this 8mm. We're going to go to the opposite 8mm bead, into the opposite end of the bead, and just the 8mm bead. And you'll find if you use your metal beads, they have a little bit of a ledge, so sometimes you have to finagle to get through it. Then we're going to pick up an 11-0, a roundel, and we're going to come through this drook right here on the top here, and pull. And then make sure this is neat. And then pick up a roundel and an 11-0 seed bead, and then go into your 8mm bead here. And now this is what I have. And I'm going to sew back all the way around till I get to my next bead so that I can join my next unit. And now you're just going to continue doing this until you have 15 units. At least that's what I'm making mine, is 15 units. This makes it, and I'm just counting the little blue bead on top, my little embellishment on the top, to know how many units I have exactly. Now this makes it a little over 6 inches long. By the time I clasp, it will be about a 7-inch, maybe a little bit over a 7-inch bracelet. And more than likely just right around 7 inches. That's considered average. Now if you have a very small wrist or a bigger wrist, either way, you can either add another unit or you can subtract units to get the length that you desire. You'll just want to make as many units to the inch that you, just under an inch that you want to end up with. So if you want a 7-inch bracelet, then you will go a little over 6 inches or right at 6 inches. And so on and so forth. So instead of doing 15 units, if you want yours smaller, just subtract a unit or 2 or 3, or add a unit or 2 or 3, whatever it is you decide you want for your length. It's easily adjustable. Now, I am coming out of this bead right here. I am going to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads, and I'm going to drop them down my thread here, and then I'm going to pick up my button that I'm going to use for my clasping, and I'm going to come through one of the holes and drop it down, and then I'm just going to pick up a crystal, and I'm going to go back through the same hole I just came through, and I'm just going to grab onto the crystal and pull it down. Then I'm going to go back through the 2 11-0 seed beads that I just added, and then go back through my main bead, just like this. Let's get a little bit closer. Actually, let's not. There we go. And then pull my clasping up. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm coming out of the main bead. I'm going to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads. And then I'm going to pick up a crystal. No, actually I'm going to pick up 2 11-0 seed beads, and then I'm going to go through my little button. But you have to make sure, if your hole's bigger than your 11-0 seed beads, make sure that you bring your 11-0 seed beads down before you go up through the hole, like this. And then pick up a crystal. And then go back down into the 11-0 seed beads. You're going to go around the crystal and go back down into the 11-0 seed beads, like this. So it's basically a fringing stitch. So you're going to bring your crystal onto your thread, go around it, go down into your button, go down into the 11-0 seed beads, and then go down into your main button again, or your main bead again, not your button. And then I'm just going to do the same thing again, sewing around my established bead. So now I'm on the other side of the bead. I'm going to go back up through the 2 little 11-0 seed beads and the button and pull my thread through, and then I'm going to go back through my crystal and then back down into my button, into the 2 11-0 seed beads on the other side. I know this is hard for you to see. It's kind of hard for me to see. I'm going to go back down into the 2 11-0s on the bottom here, pull my needle through, and then go back down through my main bead. Then I'm going to go to the other side. I'm coming out of the other side of the bead, and I'm going to do the same thing again with the other side, up through the 2 11-0s, up through the button. Then I'm going to find the hole in my crystal, go through it, go back down into my button. Well, I'm just not coordinated tonight, guys. And then back down into my button, back down into my 11-0s underneath it, making sure that I grab both the 11-0s, which is proving to be a little bit difficult. There we go. So I'm coming through these 2 11-0s here. Then I'm going to pull back through the thread through, then go through the main button again. Now you can do that as many times as you feel you need to do to secure your button on. For the sake of our film, I'm just going to go ahead and say that's enough. And we're going to get real close right here. I want you to see what I'm going to do. I'm coming out of the button. I'm going to go into this crystal in my main unit here. And then back through my 2 little Czech beads and pull my thread through. And then I'm going to go into this crystal here. So I'm just sewing around the beads in my main unit and then back down into my 8mm round bead. Like this. I'm going to pull it tight. And then I'm coming out here now. So now I'm going to go into these main beads here. Now you don't want to go into the 11 O's in the crystal on top your embellishment. You want to go into your main units. So I'm going to go through the crystal, through my 2 Czech seed beads, or not seed beads, but Czech oval beads, and then into the crystal on the other side of them here, and then down into the main 8mm bead. Now I can sew as far down into this, following my units, just going through these beads, going down the main bead, going through these beads again, going down the main bead, until I feel as if it's secure enough, and then I will do a half hitch knot. So I'm going to go one more here, go down into the Czech beads here, into the crystal next to it, and then once I get through the crystal, I'll go through the metal bead here, pull it tight, and then I'm going to grab this little thread bridge right here, coming out of my main bead. And I'm going to do a half hitch knot. And then I will sew a few more and do a couple more knots and tie off, or cut my thread, and we'll be back. Okay, so I have sewn through and did my half hitch knots and tied off my thread and then cut my thread off. And then I put my needle onto my tail. So make sure you leave a nice long tail to start with, because we will use the tail in this design to put on the other side of our clasping. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up 3 11 seed beads, and then we're going to pick up one of our 4mm round beads here. And then we are going to pick up a series of beads to go around. Actually, let's go ahead and pick up 3 more 11 seed beads. I've changed my mind. I'm designing this clasping as I'm doing this, so I'm going to pick up 3 more 11 seed beads. So I've got 11 a 4mm round, 3 11 a 4mm round, then 3 11 like this. Then I'm going to come back through my 8mm round bead on the end here, just like this, and pull this down. Then I'm going to sew around this one more time to make it nice and strong. So I'm going to go back up through my 3 11 and then I'm going to go into the 4mm round, back into my 3 11 on the other side, and then I'm going to go up through my 8mm round bead. Now I'm going to get to this bead here so that I can make my loop to go around my button. So I'm going to sew back up these 3 11 seed beads, and then I'm just going to exit the 4mm round bead. And then I'm just going to pick up a series of beads to make a loop that will go around my button. Now this is a pretty good sized button, so it's going to be quite a few beads. And it's going to depend upon what size button you use to determine how many beads you're going to pick up. I'm going to pick up a series of 11 O's, and I'm going to blend my little 2x3 crystals in with it. So I picked up like 4, and then I'll pick up 4 seed beads, then a crystal, then 4 more seed beads, then a crystal, and I'll just keep doing that until I get to the length that will fit around my button. and go ahead and do the same thing. And when we get enough that will fit around the button, I'll show you how to check it, and I'll show you how to attach it. Okay, so I've just picked up a series of beads, and now I'm going to check and see if it's going to fit around my button. So what I've done is turn my piece over, and I'm going to go back through the other side of the 4mm bead. And I'm coming out of this side, so I'm going to go into this side, and I'm just going to pull my loop tight and wrap it around my finger so that it doesn't move, like this. And I'm just going to slide it over my button and see how it fits. Now, it's actually a little too big, so I'm going to reduce this and then do that again a couple of times until I figure out exactly how much slack I want around my button. Okay, so I have figured out the size loop that I want to put around my button, so I have a little bit of slack, but not so much that it's going to fall off of my button. I want it to be kind of tight as it goes around, because once it gets around, it's going to make a little bit more length on your bracelet. And because it won't be, it'll have some room once you get it over the top of your button. So I have gone around, I've gone back through my little 4mm round bead, and now I'm going to sew back through all of these beads that I put on here, and I'm going to do that a couple of times until I feel like this is very secure. And so go ahead and sew back through your loop a couple of times. After you go all the way around all your beads, go through your 4mm round and then go around your loop again. And then I will show you how to tie off. Okay, so I have sewn around and secured my loop, and I'm coming out of my bead here after doing so, after coming out of my 4mm round. So now I'm just going to sew back down into the 3 little beads right underneath the 4mm round, the 3 little 11-ohs, and then back into the 8mm round. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did on the other side. We're going to sew through the beads in our units. So we'll sew back up through the crystal, the 2 Czech beads, and pull back down through the crystal on the other side of the Czech beads and back down into the 8mm round bead. And then we'll grab a 1/2 hitch knot on the thread bridge and sew through another unit or 2, doing the same thing until we feel secure, and then cut off your thread. Okay, so I sewed through, tied off my thread a few times with 1/2 hitch knots, and then cut off my thread, and this is what it looks like on. Now I could have gone maybe even down a unit, because this did turn out a little bit long with the way I did the clasping, but it's not too bad. I kind of like some movement in my bracelets, but you can adjust how you want to do it. You can use a smaller button, you can use a toggle clasp, you can use whatever you'd like, and make it any length you want. That's always adjustable, but that's what this looks like on the wrist. This is what it looks like off the wrist, and it turned out pretty cute, kind of like a caterpillar, so I think that's what I'm going to call it. Caterpillar X's or X-cat, I don't know. Maybe I'll just call it Czech caterpillar bracelet. I don't know. I guess I'll figure that out and tell you at the beginning of the video. I hope you enjoyed this project. Bye-bye.